Buenas Senhafide, Todosamzu. This virtual information briefing by the Committee on Federal, Foreign Affairs, Telecommunications, Technology, and Labor is hereby called to order. It is now 1 p.m. For the record, and in accordance with Section 8107 of Chapter 8, 5 GCA, public hearing notices were sent on Friday, May 8th, 2020, adhering to the 5 working day notice, and a second public notice on Wednesday, May 13th, 2020, 48 hours prior to today. In addition, this virtual information briefing was noticed on the Guam Legislature's website at guamlegislature.org. Joining me here this afternoon, and I thank my colleagues for joining me, are our legislative secretaries, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Kelly Marsh-Taitano, Senator Therese Terlahi, Senator Pito Terlahi, Minority Leader Senator Tello Taitigui, and Senator Mary Camacho Torres. Hafaday Senators, thank you very much for joining us. Before we proceed with the discussion of items on our virtual information briefing agenda, I'd first like to provide some general rules of conduct for all who are in attendance. The conduct of this hearing shall be as follows. All participants must abide by all rules of conduct and quality assurance standards, including broadcasting from a quiet room with little to no interruptions, broadcasting from a room with adequate lighting to ensure the participant's face is visible and not backlit. When speaking, please ensure that you are unmuted and that you are speaking into your microphone. The chair will invite individuals who have signed up to testify. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record purposes. The order of questioning will begin with the panel of senators who shall complete their line of questioning for each respective item on the agenda. Each member will be allowed to pose a question to an individual testifying for 1 round and will be provided additional rounds if necessary. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violations of these general rules of conduct will result in removal from the meeting room. Hafaday, everyone. I've called for this virtual information briefing to provide our people with updates regarding the Office of Technology's government-wide cybersecurity policies and measures, our plans regarding GovGuam's online interface amid the COVID-19 public health emergency, and potential programs to bridge the island's digital divide. This committee seeks to continue our work to provide oversight and support to the Office of Technology and to bring this necessary and timely information to our people, to include the ways in which GovGuam is increasing its technological capacity to meet 21st century demands and challenges. And colleagues and all those viewing at home, I'd like to call the panel of individuals who've signed up to testify. First off, we have Mr. Frank L.G. Lujan Jr., the Chief Technology Officer for the Government of Guam at the Office of Technology. Mr. Lujan, the floor is yours.
Sijus Masi, Madam Chairman, and the rest of the 35th Guam Legislature that's in attendance for this opportunity to speak about and answer questions regarding the Office of Technology. As the chairman mentioned, my name is Frank Lujan. My roots are from the northern village of Dedido, and I've lived in the village of Talafofo for almost 15 years. I am the Chief Technology Officer for the Government of Guam, and I'm grateful to the Leon Guerrero Tenorio Administration team for their leadership, confidence, and support of the Office of Technology during these trying times. COVID-19 has proven to be a formidable and one of our greatest challenges. This challenge has manifested not only as sickness, it also has manifested fear and anxiety, as well as a stigma throughout our island community and the world. I'm hopeful that this informational briefing will shed some light and answer some of your questions on some of the things that OTEC is doing to support the government of Guam, as well as the people during this global pandemic. And if you could put up my slide presentation, I can begin. Okay. We can go to the next slide, which has our agenda. So I want to keep the scope of this this meeting or this informational briefing on focused on these 3 bullets. I will cover comprehensively the cybersecurity measures that we currently have in place, as well as the status of any actions that we have in progress, and my views of the prospects of establishing programs to provide technology and internet access to the government Guam residents. Next slide, please. So currently, these are the components that we have helping us monitor our posture in terms of cybersecurity with respect to how we protect our data here at the Office of Technology. These measures have been in place since I've come on board in 2015. I say most of the last 3 measures haven't been in place until somewhere around 2016, where I was initially concerned about the fact that we didn't, although we had some protection within the perimeter of our networks, we really didn't have any monitoring in place. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, this is a diagram of how we look today. I don't want to go in detail in explaining the technical aspects, except for the fact that these are the components that protect us from any intrusions from the outside. In general, if you go to the next slide, in general, we have sensors that are actually physically in our network. We have 2 of them for redundancy, and they're actually monitored in a 24/7 duration, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. SOC stands for the Security Operations Center, and it's actually located in the cloud in the state of New York. It's owned by the Center for Internet Security, and it's also supported by the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We receive tickets whenever there is any kind of detection of intrusions, and these are at the level of critical, informational, and advisory. When we first started out, we had a number of critical tickets that we had to address up front. And I can tell you, probably for the last 6 or 7 months, we haven't had a critical ticket to address, which is, kind of speaking to a lot of the defenses we have in place. Next slide, please. Okay, again, what I want to talk about is the Albert sensors in itself. These are actually sensors, physical sensors that were provided to us free of charge because we are a territory, U.S. territory. All the states, each state and territory is entitled to bring these sensors on board into their network and actually install them. So we have people on our team who actually monitor these sensors, and it's been, for the most part, a lifesaver and a time saver for most of our team. Next slide, please. This is an example. This is where we're at today as far as our cybersecurity alert level. The entire U.S. is monitored, and we have an alert level that's established. If you go to the next slide, you can see on the little corner, there's the Island of Guam. Next slide, please. And this is a gauge for what these alert levels are. We're currently at, the color is blue. We're at the guarded level, which indicates a general risk of increased hacking, virus, or other malicious activity. Around this, as you can see, the different levels. Since I've implemented this security measure, there's only been a few instances where we've moved to elevated, only for a few weeks. This is the yellow one. We've never been at orange or red. And I think for a few weeks, I do recall us going to green. But for the most part, we've been at a guarded level, and especially during the this COVID-19 crisis, there is a lot of activity in the cyber world with misinformation, and as well as bad actors trying to penetrate different networks between the states and territories. Next slide. Another tool we use, and we get this on a weekly basis, is a cyber hygiene weekly report. If you go to the next slide, this is actually it's a 40-page report, and this is an example of the report card that I get, and this is the more recent one up to May 10th. I get these every Tuesday morning, and I review this with my team to see where we're at. So this is different aspects of the report. Next slide. The red indicates different items that we have our team focused on. Next slide. This one is kind of a statistics on how many addresses we are actually monitoring. This represents the number of servers that we have in our server farm. We have almost 300 altogether. And as you can see in the different numbers, these numbers are fluid. They go up and down. We've been as low as, if you look at the bottom right corner, we're at 104 vulnerabilities. And we've had this down to as many as 20 vulnerabilities. So this is, although this is unusually high, this is not, it's not uncontrollable at this point. Most of these, excuse me, most of these vulnerabilities are really associated with the recent changes where things like support for Microsoft Windows 7 actually dropped in January. And because we have a number of desktops that are still at that level, these are vulnerabilities that we're actively mitigating. Next slide. Sorry here. Okay, out of the 100 some odd vulnerabilities, it's broken down in different severity levels. We have one that's critical. Most of them right now are at the medium level. And again, we've been actively working to resolve this with our team, but it's by no means out of control, if you will. Next slide, please. Again, this is potentially risky open services. The green indicates that most of our services are actually in good shape. We have two that we are kind of actually a work in progress. One is the remote desktop programs, as well as some of the file transfer programs that protocols that we're actually using. Next slide. Again, this is kind of an outlook of the different vulnerabilities that are out there in our network. Windows 7 is one of the top ones at 28% detected. Also, the Windows 8 server side has also expired in January, so that's another piece that has that we're currently working on. Next slide, please. Okay, now I've been talking about monitoring our network at the server level and all the different hosts that deliver our applications. Um, this is a product that we're using currently. It's called Cylance Protect, and this is at the desktop level. Most of the desktops. So this particular slide has the dashboards that we monitor on a daily basis. This is a real-time view of what we look like in our with the various desktops we have. Today we have almost just over 2,000 desktops that are actively attached to our network. Next slide, please. Now, within the scope of this, at the desktop level, we've already monitored and analyzed over 300 million, 315 million different files. This particular tool is a bit different, radically different from tools like Norton antivirus and the other antivirus products. Most of the antivirus products always have to actually load in patches whenever there is a new breach that's out there in the cyber landscape, if you will. This particular tool actually monitors for anomalies in the files and the different objects that are in our network itself. So far, we've actively looked at and analyzed and screened over 300 million files within our databases. Next slide, please. This is an example of when we analyze these 300 million files. Anything that comes up as a threat, we automatically, on a real-time basis, quarantine them. And so this is an indication of out of those 300 million that we have, we've already quarantined about 3,400. Next slide, please. This particular dashboard tells us, just through the colors and the percentages, that we're really in good shape. If the color had changed to yellow or green, those are all things that we'd be concerned of, and we can actually drill down to the desktop level to find out where the breaches are occurring. At this point, we're running at the high 90s, and this has been this has been where we've been operating for the last 2.5, 3 years. Next slide. These are different categories of the threats that we have out there. Altogether, when we get these threats, they're classified. So we actually have 4 that are out there that are high and 34 that are low with no medium. Next slide, please. This actually depicts the different classifications of the threats. They're divided up into 2 different sections. One is actually malware, if malware is detected, and the other side is actually what's called potentially unwanted programs. These are the different, the area depicts, the amount of threats that we have out there. So whenever we scan our desktops, you can see that we have a number of Trojan viruses that are detected in the malware side, and then on the potentially unwanted program, there's a lot of adware that's there. And generally, we get adware on new systems that are procured, and those are immediately quarantined to allow our systems to be much more secure, much more efficient. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the top 10 threats that are in the zone. These really have no meaning to the normal lay person, except for our systems and our security team to look at what's actually been penetrating our network and what the rate is. We do our research on how these infections actually occur and do our best to kind of mitigate that. Next slide. Okay, this is the activity. This is a graph of indicating on a daily basis the different classifications of whether the threats we see are unsafe, whether we have abnormal threats, and also the counts in terms of threats that we have actively quarantined. So as you can see, it's fairly leveled out. It's fairly flat all the way across the board. The left-hand axis is actually the counts on the number of viruses. So we're still relatively low, and which indicates we really have a good handle on how we're controlling attacks at the desktop level. Next slide. So with the agenda, this kind of concludes the cybersecurity piece. I want to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the status of proposed action plans. Next slide. Okay, since the COVID-19 virus has come up on our radar, if you will, we've made a lot of different adjustments on how we work out there in the workplace, especially with our techs in terms of provisioning newer systems. One of the more recent things that we have pushed out there as a policy, although it isn't written, I have instructions to our teams that are out there whenever they're installing new desktops that they adhere to certain standards, which includes things like proper electrical and network security connections, as well as assuring that the desktop or the laptop is installed in a position in a place that respects the social distancing requirements. In the past, we used to be able to install desktops and laptops on a kind of a shoulder-to-shoulder basis, where people are just kind of crammed in a particular workspace. That's no longer the case. So we are spreading them out and ensuring that we're complying with the social distancing requirements. Another part that's actually is we're working to transform in all the different agencies is really the face-to-face business processes that are out there. We're in dialogue with different agencies like Department of Revenue and Taxation, as well as Department of Public Health and Social Services, and even at the business permitting level, where we're looking at new ways to transform the way we do business. So instead of coming in and submitting actual paper documents, which lead to the potential for contamination, we're helping develop and redesign that particular kind of workflow by using newer technologies that use digital authentication, as well as technologies that actually secure the documents in place. Digital transformation of document handling include areas such as the collections. When people apply for specific services, we're trying to get most of those services, those documents online so they can submit them online, and as well as clearances, permits, and one of the more voluminous kinds of documents actually includes things like building permits. Those are all things that we're working to get the applicants to actually submit those documents in a secured manner, but also in a way that allows us to assure that part of what our responsibility is actually to ensure we have the infrastructure to store those large documents and that they're actually usable. And then lastly, one of the proposed actions is, as you know, with the COVID-19, one of the newer terminologies is contact tracing. And today I can tell you we are doing that on a manual basis, and a lot of manual intervention is taking place. So this is a slide where we're leveraging our GIS data that we have for Guam to help in developing those contact tracing technologies. If you go to the next slide, this is an example where we're beta testing this particular application. We stood up a website called safeplaces.guam.gov. Right now, if you go in there, you will only get the island of Guam, but basically when you're looking at these data points, these are actually data points that are actually on, I don't know if you can see me, but they're actually on your smartphone. So I do have an application right now that is tracking me. And if you go to the next slide, this actually is an application of redaction tool that has these points in there where I can actually go in and edit. These points are actually downloaded from my smartphone, and only my smartphone has this. This is in my possession. This is not in any kind of cloud-based form where a government agency like the NSA is looking at any of this data. This is a very secure platform where I'm working with our developers to actually assure that this application is usable overall and is capturing the right data. So we're in the process of announcing this within the next few weeks. We're hoping we can pull this out in the near future. Next slide. Okay, this honed in. This is actually, in contrast to the last slide, these are actually all these data points that were collected because I'm located here. This is the Office of Technology and my phone's here. So you can see whenever I'm moving, it's generating a GPS point. But these are all points that this kind of shows me the level of detail that I'm able to generate just with my phone. So what we're hopeful with is that with these kind of technologies, we can mature and automate the contact tracing workflow, if you will. Next slide. Okay. Again, this is another example. You can see the different paths here that are that have been traveled, and what we hope to do is use this tool to identify just where the clustered areas of infections would be. So this has a lot of potential if we develop this correctly. Next slide. Okay, I talked a little bit about the action plans. I want to go on to the last part of the agenda, which is the prospects. So if we can go to the next slide. And this one is, go ahead and click on that. This is an example of the check. I don't know if the video will work there, but I put this particular slide up here because over the weekend, I believe there was a cartoon out there depicting GovGuam with chisel and stone technology in the background there. And what I want to do is kind of emphasize here that by no means are we using chisel and stone and pen and quill. These checks, we were able to get out 50,000 stimulus checks in a matter of 9 hours. Although this printer, 9 hours might seem pretty slow, it's actually pretty state-of-the-art as far as printing goes. If we wanted anything faster than that, then we'd have to spend more money in getting like printers that I've seen that go even faster would be more in the millions of dollars for those kind of laser printer technologies. But this is an example. We ran this weekend. Those checks, I believe, most of those 50,000 checks are being processed and getting out into the mail. Next slide. Okay, some of the things again that we're working on. The Guam Public Library System is working on two major things with their bookmobile to get wireless access into the bookmobile, as well as another technology I've been discussing with with the library system is they have a plan to have their patrons actually use checkout MiFis as if they were books, and so we're working with them to kind of validate their process to ensure that you know those technologies will actually work out there in the field. The other dilemma that we have overall is the fact that not all people on the island, all citizens have broadband or internet access. So I look at that as something that we need to work together as a community with the carriers, because the infrastructure actually is in place to do something like that. It's more trying to understand how we can roll it out where it's effective and it's bridging all the costs that are associated with it. So I'm still talking in the talking section, or I'm just in dialogue, if you will, with some of the carriers regarding this concept, and I'm hoping to report more positive results on what we're doing with these partnerships. Part of this would include transforming how we do payment collection. Although we have a framework to collect to do collections online, there's still a lot of gaps in our processes where they still have to take the payments up front. So we're looking at re-engineering those pieces. Another thing that we're actually working on also with GSA is transforming their procurement in trying, and rather than doing face-to-face bid openings, if you will, and the submission of actual hard documents, we're looking at having and authenticating secured documents as well as teleconferencing in these bid openings to minimize the contact, if you will. And then lastly, we're hoping to leverage more and more cloud-based services. There is a significant demand on the internet, as most people since the pandemic have seen. Our socialization has transformed to where we're doing many things on platforms such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams. Next slide is really, I'm now ready to open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Lujan, for your presentation. It was very thorough and really kept to the agenda that we've established for this informational briefing. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Just one question before I open it up to senators. I wanted to ask you whether the current measures are platform agnostic or only for a specific OS, a specific operating system. Does OTEC or other agencies use non-Windows devices that are possible vectors for attack? In your presentation, you were mentioning Windows OS systems. So I just wanted to ask if OTEC or other agencies use non-Windows devices.
At the desktop level, there's not too many that are non-Windows. I'm not aware of that. The only thing that is not perhaps the Windows OS environment, we do have a number of Macs that are out there, Apple Macs that are in the environment, and we're working to actually help secure those particular platforms. But we don't have many that are on the Linux component, primarily because we do. If we do have Linux, it's really most of our Linux platforms actually are web-based applications. We do have one potential Linux exposure, but that's something we're working to mitigate. That's what's coming up in a lot of our reports right now, but it's not prevalent. It's not pervasive within our network.
Okay, I have a number of other questions, but I'm going to just go around, do one round for my colleagues. I apologize if I didn't acknowledge you earlier. Senator Jose Pito Terlahi is with us, and I also just want to welcome our Speaker Tina Munya Barnes, as well as Senator James Moylan, who have joined the informational briefing this afternoon. Speaker, do you have any questions for Mr. Lujan? If not, I will turn the floor over to sorry, Madam Speaker, did you have a question?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Just thank you for the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Legislative Secretary, Senator Shelton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lujan. It's nice to see you, even if it's just over Zoom. It's good to see you again. I'd like to thank you for your presentation and for all the work you and your team are doing, not just now in response to the COVID crisis, but even prior to that. And so thank you very much for what you're doing to meet our new needs as a government. I appreciated all of the information, especially about the library and the MiFi systems and the work that you're doing together. I was wondering if you have any collaboration with the Department of Education for distance learning. As I understand, many teachers and students are facing distance learning barriers to move on to online platforms. And so is there any work being done in that area to help us in the event that we need to continue some kind of distance learning in the next school year?
I haven't directly interact with the Department of Education as yet, although I'm very familiar with the platforms that they're using, especially on the wireless side. I think there's a lot of potential to deliver things that are outside of out of the campus, if you will. But right now, I haven't had that dialogue with them. I think they're really focused on trying to close off this particular school year and move on to the next. But I'd be more than happy to reach out to them, and I'll based on this conversation, I'll start the dialogue with them and see if they need any of our assistance.
Oh, thank you very much. That's great to hear. I'd like to continue to encourage that kind of dialogue. I know that we will be speaking to the Department of Education in the next few days. We also have a briefing with them. So I'm sure that that's something that they will also welcome. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Lujan.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano, you're recognized, and then I'll go to Senator Therese Terlahi.
Adulis Masi, Madam Chair. And I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for having this informational briefing. It's been very informative. So I think the Office of Technology definitely, it really helped me understand the level of and the detailed type of work that the Office of Technology is doing. And, you covered some of the material that I was interested in, and it's working with our government agencies to help them become more user-friendly, to help us really upgrade what we can offer online so that we're doing our part to help minimize contact. There has been discussion on Instagram recently about so many of our government websites being older types of web pages and so forth, and the language got too sophisticated for me pretty quick. I think they were talking about UX platforms, if I remember. I'm not even sure I remember that correctly, but it does seem that you're working hand in hand with a lot of the government offices to update what they offer. So in addition to what you were discussing, or perhaps if you could provide a little bit more detail of the type of support that you can provide government agencies. I know there are a lot of them and your staff is few, but is there something in the bigger scope when it's tackling the whole website itself, or is it parts of what they're offering at this point, such as application forms and payment?
Well, there's a number of things that we're working on, but to be really honest, in terms of resource, the most that we can be efficient with overall in supporting the agencies is assuring that we have the infrastructure to host the website and encourage them to actually use the website to publish the content that they need to get their message out overall. Now, the website facing for most of them today, they're the dated part of it is about maybe I'd say 2 years. It's not that far out of date. When I first took over, it was I'd say more like 5 or 10 years out of date, and it was very static. There was not a lot of dynamic content. There's much more content. You can take a look at, for example, the Department of Public Health and Social Services website. That was pretty dynamic. It's probably one of our well-used website to get the information on COVID and other things that that the department wants to get out there to the public. So that particular website is getting a lot of traffic. But each individual department has autonomy of how they want their websites actually to look like and how to modernize it. And so one of the particular resources that we're lacking internally is really what I call web developer and webmaster kinds of expertise. We're relying on outside partnerships to bridge that gap. But I'm that's something that I'm hoping in the future we can develop and have ownership on. So we can actually drive the content where it's much more modernized. Many other states still have that kind of problem also, but I'm looking forward to kind of actually making it much better, improving it, and having the content much more dynamic for our people. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. That was a lot of really good information, and you shared it in a way that was very easy to understand. So thank you so much. And Madam.
Thank you very much, Senator Kelly. I'll recognize Senator Therese Terlahi and then Senator Jose Pito Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have several questions, so I'll stick to one for now, but could you just tell us, Mr. Lujan, we've been hearing, every agency has to change going forward because of the risk and the threat of the COVID-19 virus. But did OTEC get any money independent of these agencies to just do a government-wide improvements, or are we just working agency by agency and on these types of changes?
Unfortunately, it's an agency by agency method. Yeah, I mean, if I do wish we would have more money, but at this point, just the way, just the limitations that we have with revenues and how the budgets are distributed, we're limited in that scope. I haven't had a budget increase in about 3 years. So, but with that said, all the other agencies that do need our assistance, for example, with public health, we've been able to work with them as long as they're funding different aspects of things. We're able to engage and help support them. But to answer your question, it's an agency by agency methodology, if you will, and so far it's working, and we'll continue to try and figure out how we can bridge that.
Did you put in a request for CARES funding? For part of the CARES funding budget?
I did put in the request. There was a second round of requests, and I did put one in, I believe, earlier this week with the governors, with the BBMR. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'll
Senator.
wait for the next.
Yes, we'll definitely come back around. Thank you very much. Senator Pito Terlahi and then Senator Tello-Taitigui.
I just want to thank you, but some of the things that you put out, I don't really understand, but do you assist other agencies, as far as setting up their their equipments and things like that? So you did request under the CARES Act, you did request for monetary, funding for your agency. So what do you need that money for?
Well, I did request. Actually, there are a number of things that we're working for. I can share with you the details of it. I don't have it offhand of what I can't recall the specific line items, but I can take that offline with you if you like, and send you the details of that.
Okay, Frank. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
You're
very much, Senator Terlahi. And yeah, Frank, so we'll get back in touch with you after this hearing is over, and just kind of a rundown of any of the questions that remain outstanding. And if you can just get back to the committee, that would be really helpful. So Senator Tello Taitigui and then Senator Mary Torres.
Juice Mossy, Madam Chair. Half a day, Frank. How you doing? How's the family? How's the family doing? Good. You're going to be. Oh yeah. Tell the other half hi for me, but your office is going to be a very important office, considering we're all in your backyard right now using technology to get from point A to point B. So yes. I think you're going to get that long-awaited 3 years of no increase into your budget now. This is a good opportunity to ask for that money right now, considering everything that's involved. And I do, Madam Chair, have more than a couple questions, so I'll just boil it down to one of them. So Frank, you're familiar with what had happened in 2019 with the Guam Solid Waste Authority, where they lost close to $300,000 from a fraudulent company online. So I was wondering, have you done anything right now to provide some safety mechanisms that is similar to what happened last year in 2019? I know you mentioned some of the security measures that you have placed and cross checks. We met last year actually and had an extensive conversation on how these little alerts come up I think it's like almost every second. When I was in your office, there was quite a few coming in. But what have you gone further from our last conversation to ensure that doesn't happen to any of the agencies moving forward?
Well, just real quickly, I did have a chance immediately when I was informed about the breach itself. I did meet with the principals at Guam Solid Waste to understand how the breach actually occurred. So we literally days later we put plans in place, and we actually executed getting them on board with their own domain with respect to their email, so it's protected behind our firewall. Their major breach was the fact that they were using just the generic Gmail email. And there's a lot of bad actors out there that know how to exploit it, and they definitely did. And there was timing that was involved in how that could be executed. That's not to say the same thing can't happen. It's just more detectable once it's behind our firewall. So, I hope that answers your question. We did help in terms of putting in some processes that will help them avoid this recurrence, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Because when we did meet, you had mentioned that there's certain agencies, autonomous agencies, that are not under your I guess I want to say jurisdiction, but I want to say safety net of all the things that you are provided at your office for the other online agencies. So autonomous agencies don't have that same kind of protection. So I was just wondering so you did assist them, and the concern too is, You know, even though we have DOA and other agencies, Guam Memorial, water, power, these are critical agencies and need that same type of protection, you know, for everyone. So thank you, Madam Chair. I'll reserve for the other questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Tiedegree. Senator Torres, and then Senator James Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lujan, in one of your slides titled Proposed Action Plan, you discussed transforming face-to-face business processes. Are you also working on government agencies interfacing with each other? For example, Department of Revenue and Taxation with Department of Administration for real-time tracking of revenues received. And another example would be Department of Revenue and Taxation Motor Vehicle Division interfacing with Guam Election Commission for identification verification. Is that also one of your ongoing tasks?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is, Senator. We have been working. It's been with respect to the, for example, the Department of Administration and the Revenue and Tax. We've been working on you know, interfacing some of the gaps that were identified. Unfortunately, it stopped, you know, kind of in its tracks because there's an evaluation going on in changing the financial management system. So if we continued on with the existing system, then those are things that we had been actively engaged in. But until we get to that point where they want to move forward, we still are kind of in this holding pattern and addressing that issue with the interfaces. Now, with respect to DRT, and I believe you're referring to like the motor voter initiatives that are out there.
Well, I'm talking specifically about the ability of the Guam Election Commission to verify identification because GEC has an online registration process that
Yes.
requires verification of ID with DRT. And this issue is very critical right now as we're exploring options for voting in the upcoming 2020 election, the verification of identification specifically. So that's the type of interfacing that I'm referring to with GEC's verification of ID.
Yes, and we've been actively engaged between DRT and Guam Election Commission. My understanding is that the capability to interface is actually there, where we are just awaiting just the processes that need to be validated between you know, the Motor Vehicle Division and Guam Election Commission. Once that's in place, there is a manual process where they are submitting the applications to Election Commission. We're working to actually, you know, the ball really is in their court to just hammer out the policy piece of it, and once that's in place, then we can get them connected.
That's very good to know. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Moylan, you're recognized, and then we'll go back to the speaker if she has any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Frank. It's a question. It's actually been mentioned by Senator Therese and also Senator Pito regarding the CARES Relief Fund. I know you'll be providing us additional information about your budget request for the first and second round. But could you give us a vision of what you are proposing the use of this money, and possibly when do you plan to receive the money? And if you have an amount, that would be helpful as well, please.
Actually, in terms of the details, it really hasn't been divulged to me what the timing is on that, because in terms of the money itself, most of that, I haven't seen anything move over to any respective agencies yet. but I can get back to you on the timing. I don't have that information at this point. But in terms of what my submission is, really, the monies that I've asked for are really just to address a lot of the gaps that we have, and just the newer requirements to comply with COVID-19, if you will. And a lot of it focuses on, for example, we're working with GPD on somehow allowing their clearances, something as simple as a police clearance, to be done online with secured and trusted authentication that will work. And a lot of that's just defining those processes so it will it convinces GPD that the data is getting to the right person and that they have a valid clearance in place. So those are different things that we're working on with different agencies.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Senator Moylan. The speaker is still here with us. I'm going to move to Senator Kelly Marsh-Taituno. Do you have any questions?
I really appreciate Senator Mary following up from this morning's hearing. And so again, it's really good to hear about this different type of work that's going on. I think it's important for our community to be hearing about the many, many things that the Office of Technology is doing. And so it's really good to hear that there's progress that's been made from the Guam Election Commission and the Division of Motor Vehicles already, and that things are getting into place, as well as the other work that you're doing. So I just wanted to comment on that. And also the Chairwoman Lee had also brought forward that was some of the type of work that you could offer. I am interested in hearing more about the COVID-19 related efforts that you're doing, but I'll just look forward to what you're going to be sending us later. Situas Masi, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Kelly. Senator Therese Terlahi, and then Senator Pito.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking over the spreadsheet that we received from BBMR regarding the request for COVID or CARES Act money. And it shows that OTEC had requested 14.8 million, which is actually one of the highest requests made by any agency except for payroll and public assistance requests. This is a huge request, and it makes sense to me because of every other state. This is why they're putting their money, because we're trying to convert our government into an electronic capable government, right? Moving forward because of the threat. But it also shows that you received zero because it was submitted after the transmittal date. And so you're saying at this point, you don't have a time frame of when to expect a response on the second round, right? But if I could, yeah, so it just kind of adds to my worry of things that we recognize that your agency's, it's small, it's lacked resources, and I appreciate that. And but I am very concerned because we have some issues going back that have not been resolved yet, right? For example, and so there's two I'm really concerned about. One is it's that central website where we're supposed to be putting all our notices for meetings so that people know, they can, instead of going to every agency's website, they were supposed to go to one website. That was a statutory requirement that I think we've been waiting for. And the other one was even bigger concern to me is this land management. You showed us this GIS capability on your phone. And we used to have this type of capability, I don't know what it was called, but that where anyone in the public could access land management, or it was like maps of Guam, determine lot numbers, and then it helps us to do research. And I remember using that a lot up until like summer of 2018. It was taken offline. And in my communications with the Department of Land Management, they said this software was no longer, or they were told it's proprietary information with the contractor. And so the government is not able to access that anymore. And that type of thing really concerns me because, you know, we put in millions of dollars into getting these systems up, maybe for revenue and taxation purposes, land management purposes, and the progress is very slow. In this case, it feels like we went backwards. You know what I mean? We had all of this capability and now we have none, you know, from remote. And so I don't know. I know they've tried to explain to me these issues, but I'm very concerned about taking care of those old issues and then adding on all these new responsibilities that we are going to be looking for to you, you know, to convert every agency to electronic capability. So I don't know, maybe instead of just tell us the big picture, how confident are you, and how do you see proceeding with this type of huge tasks ahead of you?
Well, Senator, I appreciate your comments. Let me go first address the two that you're concerned with the Central Public Notice website. That has been one of my, big focuses on trying to get that launched. We're very close to launching it. We've done our testing and our development on it. We have one thing that I needed to push it out to, and that is to have it hosted and have it more cloud-based as opposed to putting it behind our servers, because it's such a mission critical application. So we're working with GSA to tie the loose ends on that one. And it's not very expensive. It's just that with all the other things that GSAs are doing, it probably was that much of a priority until now. So I'll be working with the Chief Procurement Officer to see what we can do about launching that. And I can tell you that if we're successful, we can probably launch it before the end of the month.
Good news.
So that's something I know we've been working for years on together with yourself on getting that out, and I'm hopeful. We've done our preliminary testing on it, and we're very satisfied with the workflow. We just need to now get the infrastructure in place. So again, that's something I think we can roll out before the end of the month. Let's see, I lost track of the second thing we were talking. Land management. That with respect to land management, that app was up there for the longest time without any commitment to its maintenance of that particular software as well as database. And so there was just that gap where, unfortunately, because at the time DLM did not have any budget for that maintenance, it fell off the radar. That doesn't mean it's not working. It just means that once they get their budget back, we can probably get that particular application launched. I know there is a similar application that is on board, but it's not available to the public. It's available at a subscriber level to most of the real estate personnel, because they pretty much have taken the same code and the way it accesses those records, and they've developed it in a more secure site out in the private sector as well, as opposed to being in the government side. So, but I'll be working together with DLM to see how we can launch a public version, because once they establish how they're going to fund it, I think that it shouldn't be a problem in getting that application out. But it is ultimately, it's all overwhelming as long as you don't have enough resources there. Today I have 14 people who support 30 line agencies with over 60 different lines of business all the way across, and so it's not enough resources, but we're managing, and we're doing our best to kind of keep our heads above water.
All right. Well, it's a big task. I mean, but we really need to develop that capability. We can't come out of this COVID period, even by December, without that type of capability, Frank. We really, really need it. So I hope you can push yourself into this budget somehow and, really be assertive if you have to, or I'm not sure what the issue is. I'm sure your committee chair is going to make sure about that. But thank you. Thank you for your efforts.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Therese, Senator Pito Terlahi, and then Senator Tello Taitigui.
Frank, thank you very much once again. Frank, what is the most important asset or resources that you need to facilitate your operation in total, and what is your estimated cost?
Well, the assets that we need are kind of twofold. One side of it actually includes people. One of the biggest gaps, we actually have two major gaps in terms of people. One is, since we've become a department 2 years ago, we haven't had the ability to really work well with having administrative people. Most of my people are technical, so working the administrative side, such as procurement, has been very difficult for us. But we're managing. We can get it through, but we don't. Unlike other agencies, they have their own administrative assistants or administrative services officers. We have none at this point. That's one gap in our assets. And as I mentioned before, to modernize a lot of our position descriptions, we don't have, for example, a webmaster or web developer on staff. Those are gaps that I really wanted to bridge, but we haven't been successful in doing that. And then the last part of the asset requirement, and you'll see this in my budget, is as you know, across the street, the whole building was demolished there with where we're located for the Department of Administration. So we're located in the corner right next to the old precinct, but we're actually located in a flood zone. So it's problematic to be a data center and to be in a flood zone. So one of my priorities is to get us out of this mode. We're in a building that is almost 60 years old, and it's since the fire over in Manila with Public Health, we've relocated all their facilities over here and got them up and running, but we pretty much saturated our electrical requirements here. So we don't want to, violate any building code and find out that the fire marshal is going to come in and shut us down. So we're very careful right now, but we're at capacity. So part of my plan is to stand up a new data center, and I have a plan in place that could possibly get that up before the end of the year. So those are some of the priorities.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Pito, Senator Tello Taitigui, and then Senator Mary Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank, according to the Governor's CARES Act budget, there's about $3.5 million in the budget to cover credit card fees borne by the government of Guam. What is the status of the government of Guam's procurement of a credit card vendor which would secure a fixed rate per transaction? Example, GPA and GWA secured less than 70 cents per transaction fee.
Well, I am familiar with GPA's transaction rates, and in contrast, one of the reasons they were able to yield that kind of rate is just because those kind of charges were made actually specifically for utilities, and because we're not a utility, most institutions aren't able to offer that particular rate to us. Department of Administration is actually administering that piece of it, but I know they're going back and forth in terms of trying to figure out whether we go back to the convenience fees being paid by the taxpayer, or the government paying the convenience fees. And so I'm not really that well conversant on where what the status of that is. Department of Administration would be able to answer that better.
Thank you so much. But do you know when the expiration date is, or when the renewal for that is?
I know that's ongoing. It hasn't, as far as I know, I'm not aware of it being awarded yet.
But it expires July? Is it that's when it expires, or July or June?
I think it's being renewed until they can get through the procurement.
But you don't know the month.
No.
Renew. Okay, being renewed. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll reserve mine for the next round, unless we're allowed more.
Thank you, Senator. I'm just going to go to Senator Torres, and then I have questions also. So yeah, we'll loop back around. Senator Torres, you're recognized.
I'm good, Madam Chair. I don't have any further questions related to this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. Frank, I do have I have a number of questions for you, but I just wanted to ask, has the agency considered efforts in providing Wi-Fi to members of the community who lack access to the internet? I know in your presentation, you were talking a little bit about MiFi devices that might be available for checkout at public libraries, and I love that idea. But I wanted to know if OTEC has considered something similar to the concept of Wi-Fi on wheels. I know that's something that they're doing in the CNMI, and that will help to support continued learning enrichment, communication, obviously access to info for students and community members who don't have internet access at home. So I wanted to ask you about that and about the possibility of maybe using internet service agreements at our schools or other government offices, like maybe mayor's offices, and opening up the access to this Wi-Fi network to our village residents who might need it.
Okay, thank you, Senator, for that question. From my perspective, I can only offer more of an opinion than what I've done out there, dialoguing with DOE, or I have talked with some carriers about the concept of bringing broadband access out into the community, so during this pandemic, so that we're able to better serve the public for those who don't have those services. And that is something that's kind of an ongoing discussions. It is in consideration, but it still requires more, I guess, the discussion at the carrier level with the different carriers that have the infrastructure out there. But going back to Department of Education, they do have a substantial wireless infrastructure in place at all the schools. And I am familiar with the wheels or the Wi-Fi on wheels at the CNMI in terms of how they're delivering that particular technology. My first opinion of that is that it's very labor intensive just because of the components. So when you talk about having to provision a school bus to go out there on the site to make the Wi-Fi available for students of that school, for example, in the parking lot. I think it can meet all the COVID-19 social distancing requirements, but it's still something that could be potentially problematic in terms of just finding the resources to do that. We have school buses, we have people that can do it. The technology sounds straightforward, but again, there's a lot of components of scheduling it on any short-term basis. Kind of my ideas of this is that the current infrastructure at each one of the schools, they do have Wi-Fi, they have a significant amount of wireless access points. They can be repurposed to deliver the signal out to the parking lots to kind of meet this rather than sending a school bus out. So that's one of my ideas, that the schools can actually work with their existing resources to deliver. They would just need to find a secure spot or multiple secure spots within the parking lots for people just to come out there on a regular basis to get the get access to it. I think the only other concerns the schools may have is just their own security within the schools, because they'd have to be available to the campus and assure things like that there isn't any vandalism of any of the buildings and that kind of thing that happens when they open the gates. But those are some of my ideas. I'd be glad to dialogue with them to find out whether some of these things we can launch like a proof of concept, if you will.
Thank you very much, Frank. And yeah, we're certainly looking forward to hearing feedback from your discussions with DOE and how you're moving on projects like this. I think it'll really help to bridge that digital divide, that digital gap. I'll just go back around. I just want to acknowledge the speaker. Speaker Tina, do you have any questions for Senator? Okay. Senator Kelly, any questions this round?
Judith Masi, Madam Chair, and that discussion really reminded me of my living in Palau. We did that. We drove around and we figured out if the museum had internet access. We hung out in the parking lot and we used it. It was something that really benefited the community to be able to do things like that. So I like the way that everybody is thinking, that kind of out of the box thinking proposed by the chairwoman, proposed by others, proposed by Mr. Lujan, are really important to help us get to those solutions. The small question I think that I had was continuing to work with all of those agencies. So I agree with you, it's a bit unfortunate to hear that they're each sort of handling these issues of their updates and their maintenance and those sort of issues, each to their own, where I think there could be a lot of synergy if it was to be otherwise. But at least to help them from your point of view, since you do have that expertise, have you developed any guidelines for them, or have you thought of developing guidelines as to what they should be having as minimum requirements for their websites and for maintenance, especially as we're going into COVID-19 and it's just so much more necessary to have that accessibility as in compared to the past?
Well, thank you for that question. One of the thoughts, or one of the things we actually have been working on as an initiative with these websites when we talk about modernization is the compliance with, I believe it's the ADA 508. We do have one site that is fully compliant, and that is the DISIT site. And we have plans to actually work and get all the other sites compliant. I think public health is probably at the 50 percentile level of being compliant. But in terms of the modernization, it's always kind of problematic when we talk about modernization, because one of the things we need to focus on is really just how each one of the department's individual websites are compliant with the federal government requirements. So we are actively engaged in that, and we're working towards it. That's one of the initiatives that I've had on the table. So just the fact that we've made the DISIT website fully compliant, I have a unwritten policy that I would like all of our websites to be compliant all the way across the board. So, but in terms of guidelines at the department level, most of them do consult me directly on their questions, and they're very satisfied with what they have. But what's interesting is I get a lot of the people who really are pleased with what they have, but I don't get a lot of them come up front and say, well, how can we improve this? How can we make it better? And I'm always open to those, that kind of feedback. it's an ongoing process, and I'm hoping that as we get more resources, we can be more proactive in keeping the websites more current, or having a more modern look, if you will.
Sidus Maasi for that. And it's good to hear what you're saying, that they're not asking how they can improve, because we can be then encouraging the agencies under our oversight to perhaps take that step that they might not have been thinking on their own. And it's also good to know that even though you have a small staff, that you're able to at this point really consult with the different entities and help them to their satisfaction. So Sidus Maasi, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask the questions.
Absolutely. Senator Therese Terlahi and then Senator Pito.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Thank you again, Frank. Mr. Lujan, I guess I wanted to just talk about a couple of things. So when I brought up that example of DLM, one of the issues that I just want to, put on your radar is when we're outsourcing our technology and the data ownership, right? So that was the part that really concerned me, is who owns that data? And when we have land records being put into somebody's technology, and then in the end we can't access it, I find that to be a big problem. And I'm just hoping that going forward you can write it in that to all your specs that we own the data, or even whatever you can get out of it at the end, so that we can always, if we're going to put more money in, we're going to put more money in at our choice, to build on it or whatever, but we're not held hostage to one company holding the data away from us after all of our investment too, because the government puts money and time to put those records in. And the second thing is this Wi-Fi capability in the villages. I've been hearing this since I first became a senator. I remember UOG was going to bring in, they were going to be the hub for some cable that was going to be like an education cable that was run across the Pacific. And they were going to be the hub. And we talked about it at that time, the possibilities of extending that to DOE, the possibilities of extending, or making the deal so that it would extend to every village. And then we talked about it again when we talked about mayors' offices receiving Wi-Fi, or computers, like the chairperson discussed, and so many different parts. But recently, the DOE, or the government of Guam, looks like they received $54 million for education purposes, for getting them, up to speed post-COVID. 41 of that DOE is managing, and DOE talks about exactly what you're talking about, putting this into every home so that the students have this capability. 12.5 million of that money, the governor is going to control. And so the lieutenant governor was on the radio, and he talks about the exact same thing, getting this capability into every home. But my issue is, so we've got lots of money now, it seems to me, we've got everybody talking about it. It doesn't sound as if they're talking about it together as much, but my concern is really the timing. I just saw an announcement that the Cal State universities they've already announced they're going electronic in the fall, that they're planning ahead. And I just think we have to have this capability in like 2 or 3 months. It's that urgent. And not only that, but when we've seen this unemployment is going to be electronic, the unemployment assistance, the public health assistance, that I just think, if we've got to build the capacity of our entire community to be able to access any part of the government electronically, like in the next 2 months. I feel like we did a disservice to them not having this type of capability in the last 2 months. We've got to have it in place for the next 2 months, 3 months, and going forward, hopefully. But public health is that I just feel like that public health shows us the urgency. We can't wait. And if you put that Wi-Fi into their houses, they can apply for assistance. And not only that, they can look, it just expands their potential tremendously to look for jobs, to, you know, training, anything. And it will really, I'm hoping, bring families out of poverty. I mean, you know, I think that's how we can, it's completely justified, and everyone around the world is moving to this. And I really think Guam, we can do this. And I can't stress to you enough the urgency of doing this. Like, it's got to be the next 2 months. And you know, Mr. Lujan, please, you know, if you can get in with these people, lead it, because it's taken too long. But I know that you can do it. I've seen you in the different agencies. You can do it, and it's just a matter of getting the big picture and getting it in as quick as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not sure if there was the question there, but you know, I'm looking forward to the dialogue. I can comment that I do know we have the framework, we have the infrastructure to make it happen. I think perhaps one of the biggest gaps we probably have is really just the business process, and that's a process that requires, you know, dialogue and leadership within each agency to just come together and figure out how do we deliver your existing services out there to the public, so it's more efficient and more effective. And when we come to the answer to that question, I can tell you that we have the potential to deliver. It just needs to happen really collectively as a collaboration with the agencies, including public health.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Therese. Senator Pito, and then Senator Tello-Taitigui.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Frank, thank you very much. I don't have any question at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pito. Minority Leader, Senator Tello-Taitigui, you're recognized.
Julius Masi, Madam Chair. I just have a couple more questions, and some of them very short. And one of them is just, Frank, the governor would transferred out of your agency $173,464 from that $7 million that she transferred all around to the government of Guam. Can you verify if that money was returned back?
I don't have access to. I can come back to you with that question. I haven't looked to see if it's been returned back.
Yeah, just make sure there. You're really lacking a lot of funding, so I don't want them to skip you, you know, and returning that money to you. So thank you for that short question there. You know, and I want to go off what Senator Therese Chalahi mentioned earlier, because I know it was Public Law 33-39 that created the law signed into law in June 2015 with regards authorizing the mayor's free Wi-Fi internet access in all the village community centers. So I was just wondering if OTEC was familiar with that law and whether the Guam mayors have implemented that such program.
To be honest, Senator, I'm not familiar with that law, but I would be more than glad to follow up and find out where they're at with that.
Yes, it'd be good. It'd be good, Frank, because it is already codified. So I wish, I'm hoping that you do look at it. And Madam Chair, it's just a real quick question too, if I may, since there's not that many people, or I could wait, not a problem. I have one more question. Madam Chair. Is it okay? Okay. So Frank, earlier in your presentation, you brought up contract tracing, which it's been proven throughout, the other countries that it's worked. In some countries, that it's really worked. And I see that the efforts that you're making, and this is, I think, why it's so important, because this is not going to end, in the next 2 or 3 months. This is going to be here for another year, maybe 2 years. So contact tracing is very, very important, vital. And you mentioned that earlier that it's going to take you about a month for you to do what? And I didn't catch that exactly what you said. You mentioned it would take about about a couple weeks to do exactly what the contract tracing
is the first part of the question. And the second part is how much funding just for that area would you need to implement this?
Well, let me go back to your last question. As far as my understanding, the way we've approached this is that this is through the open source forum. It was the initiative started with MIT, and with the open source forum, there is no fees, there is no cost right now at this point. Our objective is to get the simplified workflow out there in the public and kind of prove it out that it actually works. So as far as I am aware, nobody's asking for fees on this. It's all being developed from a global standpoint because we all have the same concerns. You say it is working in different countries, but one of the primary pain points, if you will, is delivering this application in a private and secure manner, because most people don't want their personal data, out there in the internet. So we're working to make sure that is secure. And this is a framework that looks very promising. I've been working with other developers. Again, I don't know if I mentioned this. We started out with 46 developers, where we now have over 1,200, and we're thinking there'll be more than 2,000 developers that'll be working towards maturing this particular application. But I do agree that contact tracing is a mission critical initiative so that we can have at least a tool, the public can have a tool to kind of bridge the gap and build their confidence that we're moving in the right direction when it comes to this virus. But I'm not aware of there hasn't been any costs associated with this. Everybody is getting on board with this in terms of the development. There is some costs in terms of putting this up in the cloud, but that's very minimal. It's like $200 or $300 a month that we're anticipating as a cost, and those are just costs associated with hosting the environment, if you will.
Frank, but you mentioned something that in a couple weeks you'll do exactly what are we foreseeing in a couple weeks coming up?
Well, in a couple of weeks, I'm hoping to have the app that is downloadable on your smartphone, as well as the framework for the health authority, which is public health, to be able to use this in their logistics of contact tracing. Because right now it's not automated. It's a call center oriented paper and pencil process, and so this is now a process where we hope to make it more digital, if you will.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Frank. I really appreciate your time and all that you're doing at the agency. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no more further questions.
Thank you very much, Senator Tiedeagui. I will certainly send the remainder of my questions into you, Frank. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Torres, did you have any other questions you'd like to pose at this time?
No, I don't have any questions. I just appreciate all the information. I'm just also listening remotely. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. Frank, I did want to ask one question. I know that we're hearing some changes that are being made at DRT, possibly at DOA, but I know that in our last information briefing about earlier this week, the Guam Department of Labor had shared with us that they recently procured technology resources to help them implement some of their federal unemployment programs. And so I just wanted to ask you if the Office of Technology was consulted in this, and what recommendations you might have shared with them to make sure that we're procuring the best possible software and other tech resources.
Well, I did. They didn't give me, because again, the timeline, they didn't give me a lot of time to absorb it, but I did get a chance to look, to actually go through the details of it and expedite my approval to move forward with it. I am aware of the vendor that they're using and their capabilities. I am never the person that determines whether this is a sole source or not a sole source. This is always a procurement issue. But ultimately, I looked at all the basic technical components, and it looked okay to me, and I approved it moving forward. But they did pass it through me, and they had my blessing to move forward. They have a monumental task at hand, especially dealing with the unemployment and trying to mechanize that piece so that they could, deliver the services they need to effectively. So we are supporting it, and I'm hoping, I'm monitoring it from a background standpoint, but I do know that they're working hard to get the software delivered timely.
All right, thank you very much, Frank. Also, just one last question. We've heard it brought up in the news recently, and our office sometimes, from time to time, we've had to use electronic, or I guess do or complete electronic transactions to include the use of electronic signatures. And I know that it's cited in the code, the Guam code, but I wanted to ask if the Office of Technology has formulated a potential policy for standards concerning the development of electronic transactions to include the use of electronic signatures.
We haven't delivered standards per se. I have been working with each one of the individual agencies in mechanizing that piece for authentication. This is for most agencies, this is a new thing. I've been doing my own digital authentication because that's something I do as a best practice. But every one of the agencies have their own, and they have their own reasons why they don't do digital in the past. Now, I can tell you that all of them want to now do digital. So they're moving forward, and we'll be developing a policy to help give them more guidelines. We're looking at 2 more mainstream products like Adobe Sign and DocuSign. Those are major products out there that are used in the industry for authentication, and so we're going down that line. And yes, every agency, I can tell you, all of them are talking with me about that.
Excellent. Well, we'll certainly be keeping posted and hope that you share your policy with the legislature as well, and the judiciary, as the entire government will likely be moving in this direction, if not already. With that, I want to encourage my colleagues, if you have any additional questions for Mr. Lujan, please feel free to email our office and we'll try to get you a response as soon as possible. I do want to thank Mr. Lujan so much for taking the time to provide us the presentation and answer all of our questions. And just as we close, I just want to express Ndokula Sidus Ma'asi, Toris Hamzu, Porifanatin Midzu Pagu, the Committee on Federal and Foreign Affairs, Telecommunications, Technology, and Labor hereby concludes this virtual information briefing. Written testimonies may be submitted through email at Senator Biscoe Lee at guamlegislature.org, or may be submitted via Dropbox at the Guam Congress Building. Our address is 163 Chalan Santo Papa in Hagåtña until the close of business on Monday, June 1st, 2020. This virtual information briefing is now adjourned. The time is now 2:40 p.m. Sidus Ma'asi, everyone, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay safe.
you.